Sonu Ahluwalia.
Good to see you on a Monday morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this first one, so interesting to so many people because it has to do with the sleep and the lack thereof and how much you really need and what happens later in life with your cognitive reasoning, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah. So, I'm guilty of this. I don't sleep enough. And, we tell all our patients you should sleep enough. Because,
what's enough, by the way?
Well, we think about 7 hours is probably the right amount, but everybody's different. Some people need 8 or 9, and some people can do in 6.5. But, we know that lack of sleep can lead to stress. Right? It can lead to obesity, it can lead to heart disease, it can lead to anxiety, it can lead to mental illnesses, all sorts of things. So sleep well. What we didn't know is that it can lead to the significant cognitive decline. So what that means is they looked at a bunch of people, got an MRI, called them back a year and a half or 2 years later and got a history and said, how much do you sleep? And then they looked at how much their brains had become smaller, and they correlated lack of sleep to the brain getting smaller faster, which means it also correlates with the decline. So
these are like people who are getting maybe 6 hours of sleep or less?
So I think 6.5 was the average. So, an hour less. So these were like 5.5 hours was the smallest number.
What do you get, Mr. Edwards?
It depends. It depends.
Yeah.
So if people turn to two points out of that. One is you say correlation. That's very important.
Absolutely.
Not cause.
No.
Could be the cause, but we don't know.
We don't know because
maybe the reason they don't get that much sleep has to do with why their brains are getting smaller.
But you get older and it's harder to sleep anyway.
Absolutely. But, trying to get that sort of causal relationship is very difficult. What we have most of the times is, this and this come together, so there may be some correlation. So the advice is, try to sleep enough.
And if people say to you, doctor, I have trouble sleeping, can you give me some sleep medication? Your reaction is?
Only in the short term. But we've talked about this before. Make sure your sleep environment is conducive. It's dark. Make sure you don't drink coffee at night. Make sure there's no stimulation. Don't eat very late.
It's like all the things you know.
Exercise. All of these things. So there's a lot of natural remedies. But most important thing is at least try to get the sleep, because we consciously think about, oh, we only have this long to live, and let's try to make the most of it. But perhaps we're not the most productive.
Okay. Earlier this year there was a big to-do about the stem cell research and how you could replicate it. And now, not only are they backtracking, they're having to do a huge retraction.
You can take regular cells and
recreate.
Right.
Yeah. But if you step back a little bit, we talk about these research articles all the time on this show, right? And we trust them. We say when somebody publishes, or this university or this group publishes, we're trusting what you're saying, and based on that, we're making recommendations. But the issue is there's really no regulatory agency. There's really not that much oversight. We trust that when people submit data, it's accurate. Right? The journals don't go investigating. The reviewers basically look at the data and say, okay, this makes sense.
But you hope the reviewers are very, very stringent in what they accept.
Right, but I mean, again, these journals don't have millions and millions of dollars.
But if you hear on the radio, you're in your car and somebody said, according to the Journal of American Medicine, right away you say, okay, it's got to be right.
Yeah,
exactly.
You trust and believe.
So Nature, which is a very trusted journal, published this article in January, which said, it came from Japan, and it said that if you take normal cells and you expose them to harsh conditions, like an acid bath.
And give it a bath in acid, right?
Right, that it converts into a stem cell. This is amazing news, right? Everybody can make stem cells. We can work. We can,
and get past that moral religious argument against the use of stem cells.
Exactly. So there was this extreme excitement in the community. There was this lead researcher in Japan. They said, oh, she's going to get the Nobel Award, and well, they found that she had fabricated a lot of this. The pictures weren't real.
Knowingly fabricated.
I mean, we don't know, allegedly. So the problem is all the authors have retracted this. The university has taken it back. Nature has gotten rid of it.
But the hope is that they're going to still try and do this.
Yes, but nobody has been able to replicate it. So now we're working backwards, and we're saying what part of that data was accurate and what part isn't. And so that's
every 4 or 5 years, there's some major breakthrough story like this that a year later turns out to work.
The same thing with those vaccines, remember?
Vaccines, cold fusion.
There's a website dedicated to just this, retracted papers. That's what it's called.
Retracted, got it.
I was surprised. But, it makes me sad to see that it's not just sort of let me be famous, but it's duping everybody else who then waste so much time and energy trying to find...
And hope. And hope. Real quickly, we talked a lot about this last week, but the whole pelvic exam and whether or not they're necessary and how often you need to get it, and whether you need to go get a maple bar afterwards to treat yourself because you've been so humiliated, or is that just me?
Maple bar? That's just you.
That's just me.
Exactly. So the American College of Physicians, which has about 200,000 members, has just given this recommendation saying that pelvic exams annually are not necessary. And the reason they said this is that a lot of women don't go to the annual exam.
Because they hate
Right,
it.
because it causes a lot of discomfort, anxiety, pain, and all
But
of
good
that
for the
stuff.
maple bar business.
Yes.
Again, just me.
So that is their recommendation. But in this instance, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has completely gone separately and said, we don't agree with this.
So for if you had a wife and daughter or sister, you would tell them.
Well, I think it's pretty simple. If you go to your internist, maybe you don't need a pelvic exam, but if you go to your gynecologist, maybe you should.
Okay.
So it's simple enough. And
But if you go to your gynecologist every year,
right,
you're going to get the pelvic exam.
right, exactly, because they're going to follow their recommendations.
So
but
you think, are you more comfortable with the
inter-
gynecologist versus the internist?
I like my gynecologist.
So the
but I like my
gynecologists
internist
say that
better,
a lot
because
of
she's a
women
woman.
don't talk about things till they get into that situation where you're there and you're
Yeah.
talking about things, and they're able to express some very private things that they wouldn't talk about sitting in a sterile office. So perhaps there's something
Yeah,
to this.
when your feet are in the stirrups, everything goes. Got it.
Anyway, so
Thank you, Dr.
This was
A.
so good, we're going to give you 2 maple bars for
yeah,
coming in. Thank
exactly. I
you.
feel like I just had.
I feel like I need to go have one now.
Sonu